Divyanshu. So now we are going to work on an application that makes use of an GitHub API and return some data. So as you can see now, I have a text input box in front of me. So what this application will do that as soon as I will write a username of any of the GitHub user, then when I will click on the add card button, then it will send a request to the GitHub API and fetch some information about the username that we have just typed in this box. But as of now, this application is not much functional. So when I type let's say when I type my name, then for instance, when I click on add card, then it shows that add card is clicked and nothing is displayed. So it's kind of a static. It's not sending any request to the API. So let's see what code I have written till so far. For instance, this is our main file, that is app.js, and it has a state associated with it, and we have an array of cards. So the profile of each user is in the form of a card. So for instance, if I will query for X and say, and when I click on add card, then it will return a card for X, and when I will click type the username of Y, then it will return a card for Y. So we have all the users in an array, and that is indeed stored in our state. And what add new card does is that this is a function. It takes the previous state and it basically concatenates new card information in the array. So concatenation is basically used to ensure mutability, because we ensure mutability in React. So it always returns a new copy of array having the new element concatenated to it. And apart from that, we have two other components, that is card list. Card list basically consists of list of outcasts, as it is signified by its name as well. Apart from that, we have another component, that is form, that is basically responsible for querying the GitHub API. And what we are doing here is that add new card function takes the previous state and basically creates the new state based on the previous state. It adds some data to the new state, or you can say in a more precise manner, it adds a new card in the existing state when we query for the new user. So what it does is that we pass a function known as onSubmit function as an attribute to the form component. And what onSubmit does is that as soon as onSubmit is clicked, then basically it calls add new card, and we are very much aware that what add new card does. So let's walk through the form and card list. And so as of now, this is the form input form having type as text, means we can only write text in it. Apart from that, this is the placeholder which shows it is GitHub username. So for instance, as soon as I remove Y from it, then it shows GitHub username in here. So this is the placeholder. Apart from that, we have another event handler, that is on change, and what it says is as soon as something is changed in the text box, then what we need to do is we have to call this dot change, and we have a function changes here which takes the event and sets the value of the state. So you can see the purpose of this input element is to store the text typed by the user in the input box in the state, so that we can later make use of that text to call the GitHub API. So what is actually happening in here is, for instance, if we want to check this function, then what we can write is console.log event.target.value, and in that case, when I will save it, then as soon as user types something in the input box, then we will be able to see that in the console itself. So okay, yeah, sure. So for instance, divy, so this is what actually going on. As soon as we type a keystroke, then that function is being called, So this is because of the on change event handler. Okay, apart from that, let's remove it. And now what we will be doing is that we have another button, that is the handle submit button, and that is associated with the form, that as soon as we click the submit button, there is the add card button, then this handle function submit will be called. And what it is doing as of now is you can say it is actually adding, it is actually displaying that add card is clicked. So for instance, let's say this is our server. When I type div then when I click on add card, it shows that card is clicked. So that is what it is doing right now. But what we want is that we want somewhat different behavior. We want to pass the uh, you can say text typed by the user in the input box to the GitHub API. And so now how can we do that is, so I have already installed a dependency known as Axios. Axios is one of the, you can say, library that we can make use of to call the third-party API. And apart from that, I already have here axios.get. So get is basically an HTTP verb. That means we want to fetch some resource from the server. So this is the URL that we will be actually making use of. So for instance, if we want to check it live, then what we can do is, for instance, when I type GitHub API and my name div, so in that case it shows you this. So it means as soon as we are going to query this URL, we will end up receiving this data. So in our case, this data is just a card. And yeah, so let's go ahead and make use of it. So let's say so Axios basically returns promise, and promise basically indicates that the request sent by us is resolved or rejected. So what we can do is you can, to ensure that we get some data back from the request, what I will be doing is .then. So .then indicates that yeah, we end up sending the request. Now it's time to receive something out of it. So we don't know whether it failed or it is successful. So what we will do is .then function without name, but we will be using ES6 construct here. So yeah, so yeah, sure. So .then, and we will say .then receives an argument that is basically a response. So for instance, when I will type response, then let's see what happens. So for instance, as of now, when I will type Divyan Shuravan and just click on add card, then it will send a request to the GitHub API and returns us some data, and I have consoled that data in here itself. So let's see, yeah, so we received something out of it. So this is the data. To be more precise, what we can do is we can write data so that okay, so yeah, this is what we have received. Okay, so what we will be doing is that in here we will pass this data to the, you can say, to the function that we have passed to the submit component, to the form component. So we have passed a function known as on submit to the form component that basically takes data as an argument. So for instance, in order to see the properties that we have passed uh, to this component, let's just console this as well. So let's see this dot props. So we have this dot props dot on submit in here. So as we can see this one, and it takes card info as an argument. So what we can do is just call this dot props dot on submit, submit on submit, and response dot data as an argument in it. Now what we are doing is passing some data in it, and this. Let's empty the text box as well. So okay, on submit it takes in response. And apart from that, let's see what happens now. For instance, I just type Divyanshu I8 and then I click on add card, then it shows my card on it. Okay, so yeah, diploma install. Okay, that's it. So let's get back to means how it is actually laying out the card to us. Let's see that. From that, okay, so we have card list.js and card.js. So what we are doing in case of card.js, card list.js is that in our app component we are passing cards as a property, that is an array, and in card list what we are doing is iterating over that array with the help of a map. In something, so map is used to iterate over an array, and it returns each one of them individually. Apart from that, it takes an callback, and the first argument to the callback is the element at a particular index. So for instance, when we are mapping over an array having 5 elements, so initially card represents index 0, then index 1, index 2, then index 3, at the end index 4, and y is basically the index number. So okay, so what we are doing is we are mapping all the cards to the card component, and card component basically makes use of the data that we have received from the API, that is this one, like the ID and like the avatar URL. So what we are doing is this image sources props.avatar URL. So when you will open this, then you can see this image, and even in your React application, this is the same images that is getting displayed in here. And I found that. So that's all. And okay, so this is what is happening as of now. But yeah, so apart from that, if you want to get more insights about this application, then what you can do, feel free to uh, move to the GitHub repository, and here you can find this application, a React GitHub API. So this is the basically file structure, and this is the form.js that I am working now. And yeah, that's all. Apart from that, that's all. And yeah, I don't think anything else is left. Okay, so thank you so much for watching, and